Greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is the second pre-introduction. I made another pre-introduction because I forgot to talk about my dogs basically better, and I wanted to tell everyone that. But you'll hear that in a second. But I got all these comments, and then somebody sent me the actual video, which I didn't watch, of the two island boys making out. Apparently, tongue was involved. I guess they're doing anything desperate to stay relevant or whatever. But I got at least 8 or 9 comments. I'm not going to watch it, and I'm not suggesting you do either. There's a line. There's lines I won't cross, right? And one of those lines is the island boys tongue kissing each other. And again, I'm not suggesting it or letting you know. I'm just telling everyone because you can stop sending me links and things because I already know about it. But here, let's get into the first pre-introduction. Greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is just an update video. My dog Tulsi seems to have gotten 100% better. She came home with a cone of shame and a bandage, and we took them off and put some healing salve on the wound that, wasn't even that big a deal. And it seemed like it was the tick bite. If you guys have, I talked about this on my other channel and then here a little bit. And the vet turned out to be just scamming us. Allopathic medicine, you just have to, it just sucks so bad. Like sometimes you need it. But what it was is, we find ticks on our dogs all the time. And we have this tools to take them off. But my dog Lucy, who was healthy, she was mostly a border collie. And she had lots of energy. It was a great dog. And, ticks would fall off of her if we didn't get to them. And, it's just like a little balloon, right? And once the tick's on, if it had Lyme's or other diseases, and I question that because, ticks are out there on the grass, and unless they go to another animal and bite the animal and then get shaken off somehow and get something from the animal, I don't know how they would get different illnesses, right? And I don't know how they were considered. Like mosquitoes are a little bit different, and they come out of the slime, and mosquitoes might bite several people, might bite, whatever. But the tick latches onto something and doesn't let go until it's filled, and then it, if it's only partially filled, it's done. It can't, it can't latch on to somebody else. And deer ticks are really tiny, and I've only seen maybe about 20 of them. I've seen hundreds of the mid-sized ticks, hundreds, maybe even thousands. I don't know how many. But for the vet to find the tick on Tulsi's leg, because she took an X-ray, and we didn't even know it was there. It was a huge tick that had buried itself. And every time we touched Tulsi's leg, she moved because it was hurting. We tried to figure out what it was, but we didn't want to, injure the leg more. And so she'd pull it away, or she'd get, she'd fight or whatever. She's kind of feisty. And so we couldn't find the tick, and neither could the vet until she took it in the X-ray. So that's how buried it was. And instead of letting it fall off naturally, which it would have done because it was a big tick, one fell off buddy. We found a big tick on the floor the other day. Once in a while you just don't see the ticks. And then they get the amount of blood they need, and then they just drop off. We used to find them with Lucy all the time, right? They just fall off. And, with cows as well. When we milked our cows, they'd have all these ticks on it. And, you pick them off if you can, but if they're embedded, you don't rip flesh off like the vet did and then bandage her up and then make her wear a cone of shame. When it would have been another day, the thing would have dropped off naturally, right? And then, it just sits there. It can't walk because its tiny little legs won't support its big body. It's a weird animal. But anyways, and I was saying, like, once you saw the tick in the same area, you would say, all right, it's probably the tick. And then the woman said, maybe it's just a slight tear. She went back on her original diagnosis, but she wasn't sure because the knee maybe moved a little bit. That she sedated the dog, all these things that, when it was just a tick, right? And, we paid some hundreds of dollars for all this. It's just a ripoff. And I'm like, it's like a scam, and they didn't get it right. I'm like, it's, how can it not be the tick, right? And so, we took the bandage off, and she limped a little bit. It was paying attention, but it seemed like it was more when something would hit the cut, and the cut healed up. And then she ran around yesterday, was fine. And there seems to be no sign of a leg injury at all. And today she's even better. So it's like, it's draining. Like, our medical system is just draining because you have to double check everything and do your own research and, all of it, right? But she's fine. All right, so I started this other voiceover yesterday. Let me get into that. I got a bunch of things to get to today, funny things. But let's, start here. Greetings, brothers and sisters. So a lot of stuff to get to. An epic Kamala gaffe and something from Mika. A lot of big stuff. A follow-up to my video that I made on my other channel yesterday to do with the sound of freedom. And so I want to start this off, though, with an epic comment that I've been waiting to do since I read it partially. So it's a great comment because if you've watched enough of my videos, the person's full of boop. Full of boop, which is great. Like when somebody lays it on the line and accuses you of something that isn't close to reality. They just completely imagine it. And you got so much proof. Like I have a body of work, including many other stories, which I'll start off with right off the bat because I want to, usually I read some of it and then I'll say stuff that disproves what the person is saying, right? But the person is so wrong and epically wrong. And what they're accusing me of some sort of racism or racial bias based on the person, this guy Mehdi, the guy in the picture here. I'll put a mashup of these two people. Mehdi and this other woman, I forget her name, who is a blogger, and she's like an anti-booper, right? She's an anti-booper. She's against anti-boopers, both of whom did hit pieces against Kennedy. And I mocked both of them. I had mocked her before. But the person's point of view is I didn't mock her as hard. Which is wonderful. Like, that's great. That part's coming up. That I mocked her less hard than the other guy, and I must be racist or racial biased. And what the person was saying was I was anti-Muslim but also anti-Indian, implying all these things. Really butthurt about this. I assume the person's Indian or Muslim or both, and, whatever. I don't know how they ended up on my channel, right? And so I'll tell a variety of stories. Most of you will know the person's full of boop right off the bat, but I want to do it anyway because it's fun. It's great when somebody like just comes in hard and they completely whiff. But as most of you know, or a lot of you know, maybe those of you who listen to my Journey series videos, is that the thing that I am banking on in terms of, like, some people are banking on the Christian tradition to go to heaven. Some people are banking on Trump. Some people are banking on Biden. Some people are, they're putting their, all their eggs in a basket of one sort or another. Or they're just very passionate about something, and it means a lot to them. It's like their most important thing. And for me, that's always been Sahaj Marg, at least since I've been 29 and started it. It's transformational. It's helped me in so many ways. And I've been a part of the organization, and you guys all know this. I talked about it. And then when the latest master, the fourth master of the system, came in and, started this thing called Heartfulness, and it was pretty good at the beginning. And then he just went completely rogue on the system. And you guys know about this, right? And I started covering it, and I was really bummed. It was a real bummer for me. And one of the things I love about the Sahaj Marg system is it's open to pretty much anybody who isn't insane, like really insane, or is using drugs and alcohol and things like this. But even then, you're not like kicked out. You just, you have to stop using drugs and alcohol until you come back, right? Or, if you regain enough sanity that you can do the practice. So crazy people just can't do it. And so it's, not good for them or anybody, everybody else. But, other than that, it doesn't matter what race you are, religion. In fact, it's very clear that it shouldn't be considered a religion, and there should be no prejudice. And in India, it's about castes and things like that. But, anybody who's able to do it can do it and is welcome to do it, right? And Daji, the current master of the system, one of the things that he did was shocking, was he joined this organization in India called the RSS, which is a pro-Hindi, anti-Muslim group. And there are Muslim people that do the Saj Marg meditation, quite a few of them. Even if there weren't, this is a so it's a far right-wing, nationalistic, racist, paramilitary group that's, marches through the streets and is very intimidating and is the exact opposite of what the other masters wanted Saj Marg to do. And so eventually I didn't quit the system. The system quit me. Daji perverted this thing called heartfulness. But that's one of the reasons I left the organization, which I've been a part of for 30 years, right? I made a personal stand of, right and wrong and whatever. And so for someone to accuse me of being anti-Muslim when I left the thing that's, most, important to me, in part because of the, the anti-Muslim hate that was coming from the master of the system, that's just a joke, right? That's the level of swing and the miss of this comment. So let's start here with the first part. It's a long comment. I didn't read it all, but what I read was great. The vast differences between how you covered Brandy, that's the girl's name, Brandy the blogger, and Mehdi Hassan, you never mentioned her demographic or called her out for betraying her people, nor did you mock her last employer. Perhaps you use Al Jazeera as a means of discrediting Hassan, but do not actually have a problem with Al Jazeera news coverage, or just that it is a media outlet, ? If you want to mock Hassan for his religion, why use Al Jazeera to imply it? Why not just say what you mean openly? Because I wasn't mocking him for his religion, right? I was mocking him for being a sellout, and in part that he's British and he was born in India, he's British, and he's coming to America, and he's accusing Kennedy of being un-American, right? Kennedy, whose family has, lost, people have died for this country. And, and that doesn't mean anything to me. That's more of a right-wing thing. But, certainly the Kennedys are more invested in America than this reporter who's originally an Al Jazeera reporter. They often send over these British, which this guy doesn't mention, because I talked about Piers Morgan and how they bring, and Simon Cowell, and they bring in these Brits who come off superior and, condescending to Americans and like they know more. And he's coming in and, mocking the truth community, all of us. And, so this guy's a foreign guy and, I guess he's an American citizen now, but he wasn't, born here. And he's got a smug attitude and all these things. And I talked about him being British. I talked about the Al Jazeera thing. And I talked about, more importantly, what he mentioned earlier, that Joe Biden bombed or droned 7 or 8 Muslim kids in Afghanistan. And this guy and his network didn't say boo. It's a war crime. And as a Muslim, which I think the guy is, I didn't research it, but that's my sense of it, and that he's from Al Jazeera, at least he's Arab, and he's part of, he's at least more connected to those people in some way, and he doesn't have a problem with Joe Biden droning 7 kids, but was claiming that anti-vaxxers killed 200,000 people, based in this ass clown dude that won't debate, whatever his name is, won't debate RFK Jr. So none of these things were insulting to the Muslim people or Indians or the rest of it. Anybody could see that only if they wanted to see what this person wanted to see, right? And this person saying, let's go back to I got to find the comment again. The person saying this, the vast difference between how you covered Brandy the blogger or Mehdi Hassan, right? Like he gave Mehdi Hassan a full name and Brandy was just a blogger, right? And so he's the one who's showing unfair bias, right? And it says here, if you want to mock Hassan for his religion, why use Al Jazeera to imply it? Why not just say what you mean openly? Also, you didn't mock Brandy for her bulging eyes or any other phenotypical traits like you did with the Indian guy, and you did not mock her nationality as a mean negating like you did when you repeatedly called Hassan British whilst giggling. I don't know how I called him British, but... And so him saying that I didn't mock, I'm not mocking enough, right? That I didn't point out her bug eyes. I was pointing out his dead eyes and how, whatever it is, you guys watched the video. But it wasn't due to his racial makeup. It was due to his character. And the guy's attacking truthers and, all of us. And somebody really not from this country who's, some hired hack from, Britain and whatever. He fits a demographic. And I mock all these people equally. I mocked him for what I mocked him for. But none of it was racial or religiously motivated. In fact, I was saying that, I've talked about this war where they murdered 1 million Muslims in Iraq and what they did in Libya and these other places, right? America having these illegal wars, I've stood up for these things, and none of these other reporters have. None of them called out Obama for the legal war in Libya, or all the presidents, including Trump, for their handling of Afghanistan, or what they did in Iraq and Fallujah, and all the war crimes they committed. But all of a sudden they care about people, and that's what I was mocking him for, right? That he says he cares about these kids, but only if, because, it ties into RFK and his anti-booper mentality, right? Okay, I'm doing this the night before on the 13th. I'm going to finish this up tomorrow morning, the 14th. It's getting late. But I'll pick up from where I left off here. Okay, so I'm going to try to continue from where I left off yesterday. I don't know exactly where that is, and I don't want to re-listen to my voiceover. It says here, also, you didn't mock Brandy for her bulging eyes. I definitely read that yesterday. Well, just continue on here. So, you didn't mock Brandy for her bulging eyes or any other phenotypical traits like you did with the Indian guy, and you did not mock her nationality as means of negating it like you did when you repeatedly called Hassan British whilst giggling. I read that yesterday, but I'm glad I read that again. I think the person is saying that I wasn't saying he was British because he was Indian or Muslim. But I was saying he was British because of what I said yesterday. And I'm actually going to cover Piers Morgan a little bit today with his conversation with RFK, just briefly. And I really dislike Piers Morgan, for a lot of reasons. But, he had that epic Alex Jones interview where Alex Jones melted down. But, all these people that come over and they're, not even really, Donnie O'Sullivan, I've talked about him. I called him a leprechaun. I'm Italian, Irish, Albanian, and German. And when people say things about any of those groups of people, and I know very little about the Albanians, I know, not so much about German people. I had a friend who was German, and a couple of them. And there was an Abiasi, like a girl in her 20s who hung out with my family. She was just a great person. She was from Austria. And I've studied Sepp Holzer, the guy who's an Austrian. He's one of the first permaculture people. He has this epic farm. If you see videos on him, those of you who are interested in permaculture, he's on like one of the sort of legends in the permaculture field. We were just making that bone sauce. People were thinking I was saying bone saw that we made that, you put on trees and the deer don't like it. You like juice the bones basically. It has this foul-smelling, sort of a thick sauce that you apply on fruit trees. But anyways, my mom identifies as Irish, and, that's what she was. Her mom was Irish. She was an orphan. Her dad was German. But she went to Ireland, visited there a couple times, and I have a lot of Irish friends who do Saj Marga. There are a number of Irish people who watch my videos, so I have a connection there. And people think because of my last name, they all think I'm Italian, but really Sicilian, which is basically the same thing, but a little different, a little worse. And I used to show up at we'd go to a family gal. Went to a funeral. It was just me and my dad, and I was like not high school age, but close to it. And I saw my Italian relatives, right? And there's some stereotypes that are kind of true with it, but none of them were. My grandfather was Sicilian, but he was a barber, and he wasn't, in the mafia. And sometimes my brother and I would joke or tell people, whatever, pretend that we were like, part of some crime, whatever it was, right? Our family. But my dad was a guidance counselor, and my grandfather was a barber. None of that stuff. But some stereotypes are kind of true or whatever. But I don't pay attention really to them. And I don't have any negative experiences with Muslim people. I don't have anything, and of course I don't believe they're responsible for the big event in 2001. Like, I think it's an inside job, right? And so because of that, I don't have the hatred that people have for them. And, and I have mostly good experiences with Indian people in India. I mean, some great experiences. And I know all these saints. I do this meditation. I've been in India. I was there for, on and off for 3 years, and have a lot of, wonderful experiences with very saintly people there, right? And so, there's the stuff going on with Heartfulness now, of course, and some of the issues or whatever it is. But I don't have, some prejudice against one group of people or another. Like, we all have some level of, we judge people whatever ways we judge them. And I mock people. I'm not like an up with people person, but it's not, you guys who watch me, it's, it's equal opportunity mocker, right? And this person's just making up this stuff. Just laying it on thick here. Like I was, whatever. Like I'm anti-Muslim or anti-Indian. And so the person says, you don't seem to have the same hatred for Brandy as you do for Assad, even though they are pushing the same agenda and working for the same powers. Do you even know why? I don't have hatred for either one of them. They are going against truthers. The difference between the Hassan thing and Brandy thing is I covered Brandy before. And, it is whatever it is, right? I covered her on my other channel when she interviewed the nurse that passed out, which I said in the video. But, they're both MSNBC shills. And I don't care about it. Like, I don't, And so this person, I don't have hatred. I've talked about this before. So this person who, look at the warped lens in which this person sees in the world. Because none of that stuff is true. Like, none of it. There's no, there was no bias on my part. Like, I don't like the Brandy girl somewhat better. And, I didn't mock her bulgy. And look at where this people, do you even know why? I couldn't care less about either of them, but your prejudice are showing brazenly. They're not. Like, just to you've imagined this whole thing. You recently mocked Corinne Jean-Pierre as French, the same way you mocked Hassan as British. Well, because her name is French. And then people said, well, she's from Haiti. And I had Haitian people that I knew when I lived in Florida. There was Haitian people. I went to a college, and there's people that worked there. I used to play basketball with Haitians. And the thing about it is, there is, my mom started Saj Marg. She did the meditation that I did. And she used to go to Sunday meditation, and there was a Haitian woman who did was a preceptor. And they were the most lovely people. And they would see me at a gathering. They come up and talk about how great my mom was. They were these black Haitian women. And one of the ladies' name was Marie. I forget the other two names. And her last name begins with B or something. Just the sweetest, saintliest, kind of nice people. And they did, my mom lived in Boca Raton, Florida. And, this is where my grandparents had lived. So I have a association there. And they were just the nicest ladies. And when my mom died, there was a Spanish-speaking gathering in India, all the Spanish-speaking countries, because they're not, Sajmarg hasn't done really well in those countries. And these Haitian women just happened to be there. And they came up to me and they were like, "Oh, I heard about your mom, and she was such a lovely lady." And very few people who do Saj Marg met my mom. She met Master Charji and these things. So it was like this kind of interesting thing. I'm in India. My mom dies. And, the few American people or people who live in America, I don't know if these were American citizens, but, I don't have any problem with Haitian people. This is what I'm saying. I have a positive experience with them. And these ladies particularly, like they're very saintly women who I'd see, occasionally at gatherings. And they were there in India, which I didn't think was a coincidence when my mom died. Like it was the few people that knew my mom who did the meditation just happened to be in India when I found out she died, right? And so, these people make things up, like they're making up prejudice I don't have, right? And so this person's saying that I was laughing at the guy because he wasn't really British, but I was saying he was British because of all the stuff I said about the Brits coming in and being superior. This person misread what I was saying because they have this warped lens and victim consciousness that they want to see the world, right? And if they watch like he's watched at least 3 of my videos, and then, is mounting this narrative that somehow, I have this, whatever it is, prejudiced against them, right? You recently mocked Karine Jean-Pierre as French, the same way you mocked Hassan as British. We can all see what you are, so I fail to grasp why mocking. We can all see what they are. I fail to grasp why mocking is necessary. Well, maybe mocking isn't necessary, but it's not like you're against mocking. And so the person said here, I have to go to a different screenshot. It said here, we can also see why mocking is necessary. Yet if she had a unique black name, people might mock her for that too. Should I mock a European such as yourself for absurdly calling yourself American? Well, I am American. Like, I'm certainly not Sicilian, German, Irish, or Albanian, right? I don't like this is where I was born, which, has its own, nightmare situation. Yet if she had a unique, well, it said here, would that seem reasonable to you? I get that the sort of people who make this sort of fun of others genuinely absurdly believe that they are beyond reproach themselves. Then there was a great follow-up comment where the person wrote this, bro, you obviously don't know Paul, or you're just trying to get an epic comic video made. And then the person had these these laugh emojis. I read the first part of the comment, then I read this person's comment, and I was like, all right, I gotta, I'll just do screenshots and I'll do this as a comment video. But this goes onto my category of when you just get things blatantly wrong because you want to see the world in a certain way. And you want to see yourself as a victim, or you want to see, groups of people as victims, or whatever it might be. No one's beyond being mocked. And like, I'm not saying mocked is a higher quality. Like, the person could have came out and say, why do you mock people? And, and that's a legitimate question because I am a person who, does spiritual stuff, right? And has, a lot of effort in the spiritual world and character development. And I'm pretty brutal. Like, I say some harsh things that I'm like, wow, that was pretty harsh. And I'm also connected to divinity and, divine energy and divine knowledge comes through me. And I say some pretty harsh things, that would be hurtful if the person themselves listened to it. But, this is how I have to cope with the world the way it is that I cover here. And I've learned to enjoy it. I've always mocked people. It isn't like I just developed this for spiritual reasons. It's something that I'm good at. But I can see where you can make a legitimate claim that, whatever, that it isn't nice or it isn't cool. I mean, that's, whatever it is. But that's not what this person's doing. They're wrongly saying that I have racial and, whatever these biases are. And we all have some of that, like just, unconsciously or whatever. We all have our whatever it is. We have our own, like, there's some stereotypes that are true about every group of people. but some of them aren't, right? And or they're not universal within a group. Like they're kind of true, but they're not totally true, whatever it is. But I don't cover that stuff here, and I don't care about it. And what I care about, well, anybody that goes up against the truth community is fair game, and especially if they're doing this stuff themselves. Both these people mocked us. They mocked RFK Jr. They're mocking truthers. They're talking about us like we're slime. And so, I don't have to hold back at all. Or when you write a comment like this, I don't have to hold back. Which I do. Like there's rules of engagement what I have, but it's great for me when I can just go full out, right? And it's not like I don't even care about this stuff. Like I'm not, it's not like I'm perfect or I'm a beyond reproach like the person said. We used to make fun of each other all the time, me and my family, me and my friends. We come from a place in America, the Northeast, where people are brutal. And my family was particularly brutal. And so, that's where I get it from, right? And so for me, a lot of this stuff isn't that bad. The comments I get, it's very seldom. It's been years since I got upset by a comment. Like that somebody was saying, this person it's okay for them to call me a racist, right? Like, is my mocking worse than this person falsely saying that I'm racist and biased and I'm, doing these things that I'm not doing, falsely accusing me of that, right? And so, like own your boop. Like if you want to get in the game, then get in the game. If you want to be a saintly, nice person, sweet person, and just say positive things, you still might catch some anyway because it's the internet, right? But everyone's out there criticizing, trolling, doing things, and so you got to take your lumps or whatever. And these people who are shilling for, like this guy doesn't believe in what he's doing, Mehdi. I don't believe he believes in what he's doing, at least not totally. They have a point of view in an argument, and they're going to deliver that argument. And so let me move to the other stuff here. Okay, so this is Kamala J. Harris, and she just says stupid stuff all the time. And, like Jojo Magoo, but in a different way.
And I think the first part of this issue that should be articulated is AI is kind of a fancy thing. First of all, it's 2 letters.
It's kind of a fancy thing, 2 letters, A and an I.
It means artificial intelligence.
See, she talks very condescendingly to people who everyone knows what AI stands for. There was a movie about it years and years ago, a crappy movie by Steven Spielberg. But we've all seen it and know about it, even, dumb people. Like, who is she talking to in this room that doesn't understand AI and its fancy terminology? She's so condescending. She does this all the time. Like, these aren't kids. If they were, the kids, she's like not motherly or she's not good with kids either, right?
But ultimately what it is it's about machine learning. And so the machine is taught. And part of the issue here is what information is going into the machine that will then determine, and we can predict then, if we think about what information is going in, what then will be produced in terms of decisions and opinions that may be made through that process.
So there's this guy, I forget his name, he might have been a Republican, but I don't know, old guy. And he was in charge of the internet, the committee that was in charge of the internet. And he described the internet as a series of tubes. And so he was in charge of the internet and he had no idea what it was about. Now, this is so remedial, and she does this quite often. She's in charge of AI, like she's the AI czar. So if AI is going to do something, like we're screwed, right? It's, it's just classic Kamala. But you would want her to be talking about AI and things that you didn't know. And we all know a lot about it, and people are concerned about it, and it's all over the internet. And she's coming in with this, remedial, like she's talking to kindergartners who probably know more about AI than she does. And this is the Democratic problem. because she's really unlikable. People don't like her, and she's really bad at her job. She's a gaffe magnet, a screw up. She's out of touch. She's clueless, and she doesn't have dementia as an excuse. I'm going to get into Morning Joe in a bit, and she would never be elected. And I said this way back when, because she wasn't popular among Democrats. She only polled 1%, and then she had to drop out of the election. As opposed to Kennedy, who has a solid, 15 to 20% of devoted Democratic followers, and then Republicans and truthers that are really into him as a candidate. So you have, he has a strong base, just like Bernie did, enthusiastic base. And so if something happens to Jojo Magoo and they bring in that clown from California and, all those other people that ran before, Buttigieg and all these people, because right now they're not going to run against Joe, but they totally run against Kamala. When Gerald Ford was appointed, he was a vice president that came in when Nixon was taken out, and he lost the primary to Reagan. So she would, she has no chance of being president or winning the primary. And so this is the Democratic nightmare. They're dealing with Jojo Magoo, obviously being not up to the task, and he's still a year away from the primary, and he's, in the presidential election. That's another year of him melting down and all these things. And then, having to campaign and the rest of it. But I want to go to this guy. This is Tim Ballard, and I covered this in a very long video yesterday, but YouTube recommended this video. And it was something that I kind of alluded to, but I wanted to cover here briefly before we get into the other funny stuff.
The time, okay, but the point I'm making is I had to study their literature. This was a political platform. This was a political party. And what I started recognizing is I named them I call it the pedophile network doctrines. Okay, it's they include things like separate children from parents because parents are a bad influence. The state knows best. Sexualize kids. Let them see pornography. 2.
Karl Marx.
3. Take God out of education because that just gets in the way. And kids consent. Children can consent to anything. At 12 years old, they should be able to vote. They should be able to do anything. Now, what am I saying here? My stomach is getting sick as I'm reading this. I read this every day. It's the woke left agenda. I'm not saying that they're colluding or talking. It doesn't matter. It's the same dark source.
All right. Okay, so the reason I want to show you this is because I was talking about how this movie was made, the Sounds of Freedom was made to target right-wing people. And, if you were going to combat this, because this is a big issue for lots of people in the truth community, the human trafficking, especially to do with children. And it's become something that the right has become obsessed with. But the right-leaning people over history, the people in America, the more militaristic, a lot of this had to do with very conservative religious people who thought they were superior to the Indians and the slaves, the native peoples of the slaves, came over here to America and committed brutal human trafficking offenses. And liberals have been, the party or the people pushing for human rights over the years, traditionally. And the Republicans are saying, no, ignoring these things, and the claims are false. And, back when you were in power, when the Conservative Party was in power, they did a lot of atrocities. And they committed atrocities all over the world. And this is where the CIA and the Hoover years of the FBI and the stuff that the Kennedys were fighting against in terms of the intelligence community and these things, and taking down governments and doing all these things that all the right-wing war hawks and the very, very recently the neoconservatives, and you right-wing conservatives didn't care about that. You didn't think about these people. You didn't think about Bush droning people or the legal wars and going over and getting these guys and all this stuff, all the atrocities that were committed in the Iraq War and Afghanistan and the stuff done in Libya. All the conservatives that voted for this are Republicans, pro-war, pro-military industrial complex, and the right-wing people didn't care about that. But something happened where the pizza thing happened, and all of a sudden right-wing people cared about abuse. And as RFK said about the Democratic Party that they decided that anything Trump was for, they would be against, and the people that supported Trump. And then all of a sudden, conspiracy theorists became right-wing and not, there's lots of liberal truthers, but they just became a stereotype. And so there's this idea in this movie and the people watching the movie that this is the movie that liberals don't want you to see. And, there's been some talk about the movie in the left, in the media, whatever. And this idea that this is being, suppressed in some way by the liberal community. But the liberal community is turned off to any of these accusations or theories or legitimate evidence that's put out about child trafficking that comes from the right. Because they don't, they believe everything that you say and think and do is evil. And you believe the liberals are evil. The liberals have their own human rights beliefs that are verbalized in the woke movement that are about racism and feminism and things like this that have some basis in truth, right? That when the right was in power, the conservatives were in power, they were prejudiced against these various groups, right? This is going back to the commenter. This is the person like accusing me of, these things because he believes I'm a right-wing person. And, they're imagining things that don't exist because it always goes in that direction, right? Where they, there's a basis in truth of it. There was, of course, slavery. There was racism. There's legitimate things that happen. But then there's stuff that just gets made up and exaggerated. And the right dismisses all the woke agenda, just like the left dismisses all this QB, save the children agenda. And, if you wanted to accomplish either one of these things, you need to pull the other side in. But you just believe the other side is evil and you're so much better and you can't work with them. And so, the only option is to impose your will on them, either politically or more drastic measures. But none of that stuff's going to work. So as a divided country, you can do nothing as a divided people. When I was going through the divorce, maybe about a year or two before it fully sort of started to kick in, I knew my ex and I's view of reality, the very fabric of reality, was different. Like we would have events that would happen, interactions that would happen, and her side of the story and my side of the story were like completely different. I mean, even the physical things that might happen or words that were said or whatever, it would be like a completely different account. Like, you weren't watching the same movie. I mean, we had the same experience, but our internal interpretation of that experience was completely different. And our memories of events, like she would describe things, and I was like, that didn't happen like that at all, right? And I knew that we were doomed because our realities were different. I mean, our literal experience of reality, our physical life was completely different. I mean, in an extreme sense. That's what happens in so many divorces and things like this, that you become so soured on the other person, you start making things up or exaggerating things, or you embellish things in your mind, and you talk and you present yourself as such a hero and justify your own actions and what you're doing, and you demonize the other person, and everything that they're doing is evil, everything that you're doing is good. This is what's happening here in America with these two groups. And if you really cared about these kids, you would find a way to connect with the liberals, maybe not the people in power and the evil ones, or the ones that, just like with the conservatives, but average people that, that you could reach and talk to, instead of trying to, mansplain your reality to them as they womansplain their reality to you. And, you're never going to get anywhere that way. And I'm not saying to do that. I'm saying if you really cared, that's what you would do. Because by demonizing the left like this guy's doing and making it more about, oh, you got to, destroy this ideology and this political movement, you're not going to do it, right? It's the power is going back and forth. The power is shifting a little bit more to the right now. But, the liberals still have social media and all these things. And it's just going to go back and forth. And the agenda is going to go through because you guys hate each other so much you can't block it. And the only way to block the agenda, and I don't believe it can be done, I don't believe it can be saved, but the only way to block it is to, do what I'm saying. But you're not going to do that because you're prejudiced, right? You're prejudiced against these people. Your hatred for the left will never, allow you to do what's necessary for the kids that you so desperately claim you want to save, right? So this was what I was talking about, the sound of freedom. That this is it's a joke, right? It's not it's a right wing, it's feeding your belief system that the left is evil and you have to save the kids and you'll never save them as long as we're a divided country. So let's move on to the Morning Joe thing. So Mika goes off, and I think it's in this. This is the highlights from their showing July 12th, and when it's going around the internet, but it's only partial. It's only Mika yelling at the White House staffers. But this is the beginning of it, where they acknowledge this guy, whatever his name is, they might tell you, but he's a famous columnist for the, I believe, Boston Globe, some paper in Boston. And they're finally acknowledging, don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. And they're finally acknowledging Joe Biden is old.
I think the plan is for the president and his campaign is to more or less own his age, own the fact that he's 81, own the fact that he doesn't run as fast as he used to. He doesn't look as agile as he used to because of his age. He has a troubled foot that makes his walk look a little more lame than he is actually in the. It makes it look worse than it is.
No, it is that bad. He walks like that. He walks like he's an old codger because he's old, and he's got dementia. Like, we've known this for a while. They're going to own his age. Like, that's a good thing because the guy is clearly falling apart, right? They're finally acknowledging his age. So these guys are acknowledging his age, right? We've all known he's old. And, there was a guy, I talked about this before. When I was in India, there was a guy who, we went to visit an ashram in Hyderabad, right? And where before they built the big ashram khana that they have now. And some guy arranged us to meet some old guy who took us around. He had 2 kids who were in America, and they built these incredibly cool houses. These guys were, millionaires in America. And there was some red rock, some nice, hills with some red rock. And the house had, one of the walls was the red rock itself. They built the house right into the mountain. You could put your hands on the rock. It was cool. It was naturally cooling the house, hot place in Hyderabad. And they had an indoor pool and beautiful houses. And we went to this guy's house, really nice guy. And he took us for a walk. And at one point he slipped. We were walking through, he was, walking very agilely through the mountains. And he slipped and he fell and he bounced right back up. And I was like, man, I would have been hurt by that fall. And this is back 10 years ago or whatever it is, it was like 2013 or 14 maybe. And so 10 years ago. And so the guy says, you know how old I am? And I go, no. And he goes, 90. His wife was in a wheelchair and pretty much incapacitated. He goes, I'm 92. I'm like, what? And so, we couldn't believe he was this young. He moved like somebody in their, 40s, and he looked like maybe he was 60. But he was 90. And he said that he had met the second master of system, Babaji, was in a car with him. And the car, the guy made some sort of quick turn, and Babaji lost his balance. He put his hands on him. And he said, I felt this jolt. And I'm like, I was wondering if that would happen. But either way, people age differently, right? People age, there's some people 70 or 80, they're still pretty alert. But Joe Biden isn't one of them. He's been deteriorating since he was vice president. He hasn't aged well. And I don't know if he's alcohol and drug abuse or just his genetics. He's past the death age. The average lifespan in America is 79, and he's past it, right? And so, he's not going to make it through his presidency, his second term. He wouldn't. He's going to be mentally incompetent so bad that they won't be able to hide it. And, these guys are finally acknowledging that they got a turd on their hand, which is this guy's had dementia for years, and they just wanted to get rid of Trump, and now they're stuck with this guy because they don't have anybody else. And Kennedy's breathing down their heels. It's a complete nightmare for them, right?
But at the end of the day, given his age, given his vast experience in government, given his knowledge of the presidency, given the record that he has achieved, which arguably is better than Barack Obama's first term, I think that's what he has to campaign on. Own your age. Say things like, you know, hey, when Washington crossed the Delaware, I was there to help pull those boats in. That's how old I am. He's got to really own.
Look at me. Listen to Mika cackle in the back.
His age, and he can do it. And if he ends up doing it properly.
Mike Barnacle, I think his name is.
From his birth in Scranton, Pennsylvania, telling his life story in a shorter version.
His life story or other people's life story? Because he's told other life stories that aren't his. Which one are you talking about?
In a briefer version than he's usually used to telling it, he can then say, I am you. I am the American citizen that you are.
You can't say that because not everybody's a snoozler, sneezer, groper, lifelong politician. You know, he only held one job. Like he has been a politician his whole life. I guess he was a lifeguard for a little bit, with that creepy story. But his adult career, he got elected at an early age in Delaware, and he's been a senator and then a vice president, now a president ever since.
I have owned homes that I couldn't afford. I have maybe almost had cars repossessed. I've put
none of that stuff happened.
Kids through school. I've carried the weight of an addicted child. I've lost.
Oh my God. Who brought in lots of money for me with his foreign deals.
Some children. I've lost 2 children. I know the pain that you feel on a daily basis. I'm Joe Biden.
Exactly. I can't agree more. And that focus group really reflected like what a conversation we might have had with friends across a dinner table or you hear across the country. People who really care about him think he's doing a great job, and he's going to be 82 when he's running. And
he'll be 86 at the end of his presidency. He's just too old. And he was too old when he ran in 2019. I couldn't believe they were running this guy, and I thought they were going to give him COVID or get an easy out because I didn't think he was capable of beating Trump. But even if he was, then what are they going to do then? The guy was wandering around on stage challenging people. But there's a conversation, I've showed this many times before, I'm not going to show it here, but it's after he called that guy fat and he challenged that guy to a push-up contest. He was having a conversation with this nice, reporter from PBS, one of those ASMR talking, oh, Mr. President, one of those soft talkers. And she asked him about the way he behaved, and he stuck his finger in her face and he went off. Even though she asked in the most gentle terms a question that should have been asked. And he starts screaming at her. And she's like, what are you doing? Like he kind of came back, but he was yelling at her. And I'm like, oh, he's having that's what happens when your brain breaks down. I could read all the symptoms. I'll do that later on. All the symptoms that show that a person has dementia. And he has all of them. They get angry without explanation, and they're just lost. He wandered around stage. And so that was, going to be 4 years ago. We saw he was clearly having signs of dementia. It's gotten worse ever since. And then they expect him to go another 4 years. It's not just going to happen, right? They have nothing they have no plan here. Kamala's a nightmare. Then they bring in everybody else, right? And once they do that, they open it up to Kennedy. And, Joe Biden was only pulling 20% when he won, when they fixed the primary for him. Kennedy would have a lot more support. He would have all the Bernie Sanders support and all these things, right? And they don't want that. They clearly don't. And so they are really boxed themselves in. It's like the end of the Democratic Party going down with this geriatric MNFer, right?
It's interesting you mentioned he has the foot problem. This is a man who grew up with a stutter. All those things, if you're, I don't know, on one show on
He's a serial groper and sniffler and snoozler.
Fox News, you're going to focus on that and say, he fell off a bike or whatever it is and make it a huge issue.
I've said this before to all liberal people. Would you have this guy drive your kids in a school bus? If your kids were getting on a bus and you saw this guy and you know saw the way that he carried himself, would you allow him to drive him on the bus? He's not mentally competent. He should be retired. He's past the age of retirement. He should retire. Look at this guy.
You talk to Democrats who have voted for him before and look at the alternative. Susan Page.
Look at the alternative, right? Well, there's multiple alternatives. There's also Kennedy, but that's it, right? The whole case for Joe Biden is Trump. And if Trump goes to jail, then it's time to retire this guy, right? And they set it up so that Trump, like, based on what they have now, Trump should go to jail.
The alternative is the same age, maybe 1 or 2 years younger. It's not like Donald Trump, if he wins the nomination, is some spring chicken.
Yeah, but he's doing a lot better than Joe Biden, which shows you. They cut this part off of the highlights, but I have it here. And so this is Mika yelling at the White House staff after that segment.
You sure as hell better make sure he doesn't fall on a sandbag. And I blame the staff for that. I mean, these are the things that are going to hurt him. These are things that are going to be played on a loop. So do a better job, because you can't have these video images of the president tripping or the president, like, going the wrong way. It's not going to...
You can't have these video images of the president tripping and going the wrong way. Like, they're admitting he has dementia. He wanders around. He's lost. So she's saying, do a better job of handling him.
Work in this presidency, because his age is going to be a factor. His age is going to be a factor, and it's your job to make sure he gets from one place to another. He can handle the presidency. You have to handle his schedule and where he goes.
He can't handle the presidency. He's got handlers, and she knows it. And his handlers, they want to, like, put him on a puppet string with marionettes or roll out body doubles. I mean, like, it's just that bad. You know, Reagan had Alzheimer's his last couple of years in office. His son has admitted it, but everyone knew it. And they would put him out, and he would, like, you know, Bruce Willis, they put him, like, in a pair of jeans, as John Kerry said. Like, there was a leaked audio of John Kerry talking about how they rolled Reagan out in a pair of jeans and a cowboy hat, and he waved to everybody. Like they said, you know, they prompted him to wave. God knows where he even thought he was, and his mind was gone. And for 2 years, we didn't have a president. Like, they were just running the thing with a guy with Alzheimer's, which is, you know, pretty close to the actual what happens there, right? And so all these things are lining up to screw the Democrats. Like, they're in bad shape. They don't have an alternative. They, you know, want to make JoJo's age, normalize it. But, you know, you should have done that when he was running against Trump, because he was showing signs of dementia then. And people can choose to see it or not. Like, you know, but it's, if they get rid of Trump, then this is a no-brainer. You know, because Trump is the only reason that people are willing to vote for Joe Biden, for most of them, because they don't want Trump, right? That's, you know, if he got that many votes, and, you know, there's, I don't want to get into a whole thing about that, but if he got 80 million votes, it was anti-Trump votes. It wasn't pro-Joe Biden votes. So going into this thing with Robert Kennedy Jr. and Piers Morgan. Now, Piers Morgan is one of the people I dislike the most. He was on The Celebrity Apprentice. He was unlikable then, and he just became more unlikable. He did that, you know, that interview with Alex Jones, which is a disaster for the truth community, but that was Alex's fault. But Piers is arrogant, obnoxious, and just everything about the guy. And he did a much better job than Bill Maher. Like, me and my wife were commenting, this interview is better than Bill Maher's. There's still plenty of Piers. But Bill Maher, like, you know, wrecked whole stories that we wanted to hear the end of and things like that, right? But this is something that, you know, I talked about, I was able to see, and I want to talk about that next. Yeah, let's show you the clip here first.
Right? I mean,
Oh yeah, we were trained to argue, and my grandfather did that with his 9 kids. He would make them, you know, every night at the dinner table take opposite positions.
yeah, I do that with my kids. I think it's healthy.
So I'm going to explain this in a moment. But my wife and I were listening to this, and while we were listening to Kenny in the first place, I said this is the kind of family he grew up in. You guys who watch my videos will remember me saying this is like 3 or 4 videos ago. I'm not going to find it, but somewhere. I want to talk about that because it's important.
The cash and prize, the connections that you have, and the access and the education, and then it's, you know, I have 11 brothers and sisters and 29 cousins, and we all love each other and are.
And you argue a lot, right? I mean, you.
Oh yeah, we were trained to.
So, I said all this. I talked about Kennedy's education. I said this to my wife while we were listening to him. I said, this is the kind of education he's had. This is the kind of family he had. I brought up the movie Mr. Fantastic. You guys might have heard me say this. And I never heard that. Like, I didn't hear that. I didn't know much about the Kennedys' upbringing. I don't know that much about the Kennedy family. I got a sense of them, but hearing him talk, there's these intellectual families, and I realized that this is what he grew up in. I described exactly what he said later in this Piers Morgan. And the information just comes to me. And, I have some talent, some ability. I have some training, and I've worked at this to some extent. I do it as a job, so it's, becomes better and, more fine-tuned as I get older and do more of it. Until, I get, older and older, and then it'll be maybe something different, right? My brain still is sharp, and, I have this other ability. And it's been, completely enhanced by doing the Sajmark practice of meditation. And information just comes to me, and it, I just let it flow through. And I say it. I just, whatever comes through. It's not exactly like channeling or whatever. And whatever abilities I have in that, it wouldn't be nearly as good if I didn't have the connection I get from the Sajmark meditation, right? But it's there. And when people write me comments or, whatever it might be, this will often happen. Or I'll have to make a decision about something, and the information will just flow, and I'll know exactly what to do. And this has happened over and over again. People will say something. I'm not pointing this out to say, oh, I was right, because, there's something more comprehensive going on here. But it's a way of living your life and connecting to the source, which, the divinity within you and God and, your soul and all these things, the spiritual aspect of your life, and allowing information to flow through and having, a different way of making decisions without necessarily doing physical research and things. But I just know stuff. Like, I can read people, I can read situations, and I just, I'll look at a picture of somebody or I'll see somebody and I'll just, I'll know everything about them. Like, I'll know, everything that God shows me, right? Like, they'll be, all right, this is what this is, right? And, the accuracy of it is, it's almost, I guess, perfect, right? My ability to interpret it might be, I might make a mistake here or there or not really care or be sloppy with it or whatever. But the information coming through is pure. And when you do this way, it's, it's so much easier and so much better. And there's a flow to it. Like, this Kennedy interview came at the same time, right? And, you're opening up to all possibilities and getting rid of your preconceived ideas and letting divinity show you what actually happens. The second master of the Sajmark system, Babaji, had an operation where they gave him, I want to say ether, or I don't know if it's some kind of anesthesia, and it wiped out his memory. And, he was somebody who didn't really read because he didn't want to take other people's opinions. So when he asked a question, he was in this state of innocence, and God would show him the answer. He was in this spiritual state of innocence, which is like the sort of, ultimate version of this, right? Where you don't have any preconceived ideas or prejudices of your own. You let the information flow, right? As opposed to this person who wrote the comment earlier, and the people who were, talking about, who left comments about my original video on my other channel about the sound of freedom. I know what you're thinking. I know, like this person who left a comment about me stereotyping Mehdi Hassan and being, somehow subliminally racist or consciously racist or prejudiced was pinholing and prejudice against me, saying I was part of a right-wing, former European, prejudiced, racist, anti-Muslim group, which people know, you guys know I'm not. But that person just made that up either intentionally to troll me, which I don't think was the case, because I don't get people on the left like this, right? This person watched numerous of my videos and then, was coming up with this scenario that they made up inside themselves with their preconceived prejudices and either, intentionally or unintentionally drop this, narrative that has no basis in reality, right? There's nothing, even a little bit true about it. Something they completely made up, and then accuse me of doing the same thing, right? Like they put me in a box of, right wing, whatever it is, and instead of really understanding where I come from and listening to videos, and it's above his level. Like the videos that I produce, the consciousness in them is above his level of comprehension, but he wanted to look down on it when he should be looking up, right? And not because I'm, whatever I am, because I do something that has genuine spiritual connections, real life connecting to the soul and the divinity, and it manifests in ways that you can see. Like those of you who saw my video that I'm talking about where I, said what exactly Kennedy's family was, and I talked about his education, the kind of person. I said, they sit around the dinner table. I said those very words. The image, the idea appeared to me. They sit around the dinner table and, like he said, he was in Cape Cod where it was like a family base. Cape Cod is a beautiful place. I think it's an island. I don't know. I've been there. I think we crossed a bridge. I've been there, when I was younger. And it's, where rich people live, like the Hamptons in New York, but kind of even nicer. It's on the ocean. And they all live there and they come together and, they would sit around the dinner table and they would take different sides and debate the issues to train their minds and their skills, right? And it serves Kennedy well in his ability to, dust these other candidates. That's why they don't want to debate him, because he's trained from his, at a very young age, and then his life as a lawyer, to argue these things. And these people are just putting out lies. They know that they're just shilling for positions that, since the media doesn't call BS on them, they get away with it, right? But now it's all coming around because at some point, Jojo Magoo will be incapacitated and, he can't campaign. He couldn't campaign in 2019. They hit him away because of COVID in 2019 and 20. And, in 20, not in 19. But they hit him away in COVID when he was running against Trump. He had a couple of debates. He gave him the Jojo Magoo talkie pills, like that little meme I show you of Kyle Dunegan's, Jojo Magoo. He gives talkie pills, right? He takes pills for clarity. They have enough medical abilities to give him lucid moments, when he needs to, but he can't be taking that stuff all the time. Sure, it has drastic side effects. And, he's falling apart. He's got that weird walk now. He's got that little old man shuffle, and Mika's blaming him for, not, blaming the people around him. Don't put sandbags in front of him. And the guy's just, he can't do it. Like, he's not going to make it to the finish line, right? And when Kamala is their next best thing, and she sucks, and then they have all these other guys, right? Newsom in California, some of these other guys that, they're just unlikable. So then they get stuck with Kennedy, and then what do they do with Trump, right? Okay, so I'm going to end this thing here. I have to go back and do a pre-introduction about the Island Boys because I'm getting messaged all over the place about them making out. I've been reading the things while I go through and edit this. And, I'm getting some comments, most of them agreeing about this film, but some of them, whatever. And I'll probably cover some of those other comments in my video on my other channel, the Pac Laughs Now thing. But anyways, that's enough for now. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely important from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.